Hello and welcome to the 18th podcast of Soulful Thoughts from Ireland. This week we're going to be hearing some stories of some local saints, which I just love. The stories of the mystics, the saints of long ago. So I welcome you, and today I'm calling this podcast Stepping into the Eternal. This story begins in Bantry on the Beara Peninsula, where I learned of their patron saint, Saint Conora, a woman anchorite or hermitess who was known to be fully grounded in her inner house of wisdom and the timelessness of the eternal. When she was nearing her death around the year 530 of the Common Era, she had a vision of all the monasteries in Ireland, which were quite a few at that time, seeing each of them as flames of fire reaching up to the heavens. The flame that was the strongest and most direct called to her. And even though she was now infirm of body, she set out walking the 150 miles to that monastery. Her desire to die, be buried, and resurrect into her eternal and evolutionary being on this holy ground. Her journey, I discovered, took her to Scattery Island in County Clare, to the monastery of St. Senan. On my return journey from Sligo, I decided to make a day of pilgrimage across to the now uninhabited island. Arriving the night before, the weather forecast was miserable, and it was undecided if the boat would even be going across to the island. I was also told that due to the weather, I would only be able to stay 2.5 hours rather than 5 hours. That night, I prayed to St. Conora to clear the weather. Little did I know what I was praying for. It was the internal clearing of the weather that she began working on during the night. I awoke in panic and anxiety and was besieged by feelings of absolute failure as a leader. I saw myself leading people over the mountains, but we did not make it to safety. We did not reach our destination. This is a fear I have carried ever since I was a teenager, this fear of not reaching my destined place, my destination. And now I knew why. I was beyond distraught, as we all perished on that mountain journey. However, I was also shown that what I did lead the people into was eternal life. The knowledge and experience of this, and that yes, we all physically died, but with the skills and means of dying into our eternal nature. The anxiousness subsided, and falling into a lucid sleep and dream, St. Senan came to me and showed me the ruins of the monastery on Scattery Island. He then handed me his staff and clearly and firmly stated that I must visit the well. In the morning, the internal weather and the lucid dreams of the night before were still with me. The outer weather was miserable. I knew there was a well close by and thought I would visit it after my island journey, that is, if we were even going. Upon arriving at the dock, the rain cleared and the day opened before us. I offered my thanks. And here the story of St. Conora and St. Senan unfolds. After walking all those miles, in true saintly story fashion, Saint Conora walked right across the water to the island, where she was met at the shoreline by a belligerent Saint Senan. Even though a number of the monasteries of the time housed both women and men, Saint Senan strictly forbade any woman, not even holy hermit women, from stepping onto his island. Saint Conora took him to task and forthrightly told him that women were equal in discipleship to men, that Yeshua empowered them as he did the men, and that the eternal nature and life was equally available to all. He argued vehemently. She argued persistently. She said if he didn't let her on the island, she would remain on the shore until she died, and her body would be buried right there. Saint Senan replied that she couldn't do that, as her grave would be washed away with the tides. So be it, she said. He finally relented and allowed her onto the island, in some of the stories. Dying soon thereafter, she was buried on the western side of the island, on the shoreline, and her grave can only be seen at extreme low tides. Somehow it seems a fitting place to be buried, in that in-between place, the threshold of life and death. And in the Christian mystic tradition, the West is the direction of death and dying, and of letting go. Did Saint Conora request this? Or could Saint Senan just not bring himself to bury her on the island? Who really knows the intricate matters of another human heart? What I do know is that as soon as I stepped on the island, I felt an enormous swell of energy and presence of the eternal. There is a prayer stone, a large flat slab, close to where you disembark from the boat. I circled this 3 times, praying to be open to the eternal, and placed my offering of seaweed into the base of the stones. There was a wonderful guide who was dispersing all sorts of knowledge of the island, but I could not take it in. My soul was hearing and feeling other mysteries. I eventually wandered off on my own, though I have to say not without some measure of guilt, as if I was causing a personal affront to this guide and the group. Fortunately, I broke free from this guilt, and especially so as my wandering took me to a large well, which I didn't even know was on the island. My lucid dream from the night before returned. As I stood at the entrance of the well, I felt a surge of enormous guilt come forward. Seems to be a theme here. The guilt for my inability to lead the people to safety in the mountains. The same story that had arisen the night before. But I now realized that what was needed was self-forgiveness. I prayed that I may forgive myself for this perceived outer failure. I prayed for forgiveness of humanity, and that we may be restored to a right and wise way of living and loving together. I prayed for forgiveness for what we have perpetrated upon our earth. I went down into the well and covered my head with the holy water, washing myself clean from all the guilt I had stored in my soul. I saw the image of a staff in the well, the same one that St. Senan had given me the night before. Rising from the well, with the staff in my spirit hand, I began to walk with a lightness of being, a cleansed heart. I made my way to the Hill of the Angel. This is the highest point on the island, with an expansive view in all directions. The story tells us that Saint Senan was known to be very wise, even as a young child. Hence his name Senan, which means little old one. His wisdom grew, and after being made a bishop, he travelled to many places, founding churches along the way. Then, seeking a place of prayer and quiet to settle, he was meditating on a stone for inspiration, when an angel came and picked him and the stone up and placed him on the hill of the island. Hence the name, Hill of the Angel. My mind and heart spread open into the fields of peace and grace that were permeating all around. It truly is a peaceful hill. What is not so peaceful, however, are the early Christian legends in Ireland, which are often accompanied by their saints entering into combat with snakes or serpents. This is interpreted as the Christians doing battle with the pagan Druids. Yet this does not always make sense to me, because the Druids prophesied the birth of Yeshua, and often successfully blended the two traditions together. No doubt there were always those who were dogmatic in their ways. In this case with Saint Senan, we have a similar story about how he subdued the large serpent in the sea around the island. But as we know, the snake and serpent were also ancient forms of the feminine wisdom. And given Saint Senan's reputation of not being a feminine lover, perhaps it was more a matter of a personal battle. The guide I met up with later, delighted in telling me that Saint Senan, in fact, did not die on his holy island, but on a neighboring island within a community of nuns all around him. And his feast day is on March the 8th, International Women's Day. We both laughed heartily at these ironies. I did end up staying the whole day on the island. The weather cleared, became sunny and warm, and so another boat trip came later in the day, and they allowed me to return with them. I was so grateful as I walked and prayed and lingered at the sacred sites, soaking up the eternal energy that spread across this isle. I contemplated how easily the entry to our eternal nature is blocked, and how easily it is entered again. For me, this sacred pilgrimage allowed me to feel the guilt of ages past. I saw how this guilt had blocked my life and journey here and now. And I also saw and felt how easily our blockages can fall away if we are willing to forgive and let go. Forgive ourselves and others. In the Gospel of Thomas, we hear the words of Yeshua. Recognize what is in front of you, and what is hidden from you will be revealed. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. In my guilt, my eternal nature and leadership abilities were hidden. In recognizing the guilt and letting it go into the western direction of forgiveness and burying it in the shoreline of love, my lightness and timelessness of being could once more resurrect. Something tells me Saint Sennen may also have buried his inability to live and be with women. Oddly, it was he, not Saint Conora, that I directly communed with. May we always be open to be assisted from all manner of places and directions, and may we forgive and keep forgiving and set ourselves free. So we certainly are in a time where forgiveness, where setting ourselves and others free is much needed. So until next time, I'd like to invite you to experience some new offerings I am now making available. Virtual personal retreats, private sessions for ancestral and soul healing, and an online course in October, Living into the Mystic Unknown. In these troubled times, we need all the assistance we can get to reveal and live from our eternal nature. All the information for these offerings are on my website, meghan.life. So, be well, be committed to the eternal happening in your soul, in your life. Shlan.